Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Sometimes the best way to find a living is to stay right where you are and study with UAS online. Career-specific distance programs from the University of Alaska Southeast are the fastest way to increase your earning power.
We connect all over the world.
The National Weather Service.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller, and this is your Alaska weather. Tonight, May 17th, 2016, one of my favorite days. Happy birthday to my wife. And you can follow us online at www.arh.noaa.gov. Our weather info line is 1-800-472-0391, and that is a 24/7 line that'll get you to a forecaster if you have more questions about your forecast. Follow us on weather.gov/Alaska for all 3 Alaska offices. We're on Facebook at NWS Alaska, posting lots of various products for fire weather this time of year. On Twitter, you can find us at NWS Alaska and use the hashtag AKwxTV for a regional perspective. And then this show and a few other segments are available on our YouTube channel, again, AKwxTV. So let's get into our headlines this evening. Biggest headline so far is that the Colville, the Sag, and the Kapparik River are all open now. They've all gone out, and so concerns for flooding are no more for those locations, which is good news for the residents up there. This is going to be a slow-moving pattern that we're going to talk about tonight, and definitely what we've seen over the weekend, the sunny, the dry, and even some of the windy, all those things are more or less behind us for at least the foreseeable future. We're going to be talking about a slow-moving, cooler and cold and cloudy pattern. And then a new low will move in late Thursday and into Friday from the North Pacific, and that's going to be our real weather maker that we want to discuss throughout the evening. So let's take a look at our breakup map, and as we mentioned there, the Colville, the Kapparik, and the Sag have gone out. You can see we don't have any more warnings or advisories at this time. There are some unknown locations there up in the northern portion of the state, but otherwise open rivers for just about everywhere throughout northern interior and through south central. Taking a look at our fire weather danger map, not a lot of change from yesterday. Still have those higher fire concerns right along the Alaska Range there, especially with that southeast wind that we saw yesterday through much of the Alaska Range, through the Chugach and the Kenai Mountains. And then high fire danger, again, southeast flow coming through these mountain passes has really dried things out on the northwest side of any of the mountains, and so that's why we have those higher fire dangers there. Not looking for anything extreme at this time, but certainly it has been dry. This cooler, cloudy pattern should help to keep things down for at least a little while, but not a long-term fix by any means. So let's take a look at our satellite loop now. We'll put this into motion. You can see here is our big area of low pressure that we're going to be focusing on for the next few days. This has really been our weather maker over the last 24 hours and will continue to be so as it pulls slowly off to the east. And so this has brought plenty of moisture and light rain up into southeast Alaska. Sitka and Yakutat area have seen it all the way back into Cordova, almost to the Prince William Sound, not quite that far west did the rain make it this afternoon. And then as we get up towards the south central and more portions farther north into portions of the interior, that's where we've seen some higher cloud cover than we have the last couple days, and that's courtesy of a shortwave trough that's kind of dropping in here over southwest Alaska, helping to trigger some of these clouds here in southwest Alaska and helping to make for some light rain through the Susitna Valley as well. So let's put that into motion one more time here. And you can see also pointing out some low stratus that's hanging out along the Arctic coast. That's helping to keep some lower visibilities with some fog up there and also some very light snowfall. And then another weak area of low pressure spinning out here near the Pribilof Islands in the central Bering. This is very weak surface low, so not really expecting a lot of precipitation. However, it is helping to keep this marine stratus kind of circulating through the Bering, and we'll see that here on the visible loop. Let me step over here so you can all see as the sun does rise and stretch out to the west. There's that low stratus, just a little bit of shower activity there where it's a little bit more open. We call that open cell cumulus, and that's a little bit more indicative that there could be some showers, but otherwise just some colder air coming off the ice pack and north-northwest flow, and that's really helping to make for that low marine stratus. Some of that is making it even south of the chain down to the North Pacific. Here's our big area of low pressure that we mentioned on the first satellite loop, and you can see that really pushing off to the east and towards southeast Alaska, and just some of the weaker bands of rain wrapping back towards south central. And looping that one more time, fairly nice day for portions of the northwest portion of the state and up towards the Brooks Range where the low stratus was not in play as much, and a fairly nice day up there, but cloud cover has made its way into the interior as well with some light rain reported at Fairbanks this afternoon. Let's take a look now as we step into today and tonight's forecast. Again, our area of low pressure at 997 millibars, and that is really sprinting that precipitation up into southeast Alaska, and this occluded boundary will really just remain right around this area of low pressure as it moves into the panhandle very slowly through the overnight hours. Weak area of lower pressure, really this whole black line here is lower pressure. This is more courtesy of a thermal trough, which is made by having just warmer temperatures in the low levels, and so we start to see this in the summertime, and a lot of showers and thunderstorms can form along this. It's much weaker today than it was, say, over the weekend when our temperatures were significantly warmer inland than they were over the Gulf of Alaska, but obviously with the cloud cover that's not the case today. So just expecting some showers, potential for an isolated thunderstorm over the Kilbuck or Clune Mountains, but not expecting anything widespread. There's our light rain stretching from the Susitna Valley up towards the Fairbanks region. We do see some of that rain mixed with snow as we get into the northwest portion of Canada, the Yukon Territory there. Our light snow up along the Arctic coast with the patchy fog, and really not a bad day for much of the Seward Peninsula in western Alaska. Just seeing some broad northeast and northerly flow starting to set up for those regions there. So some showers near Bethel, but nothing very widespread. And there's our marine stratus out over the Bering, and some possibilities for some showers there, but really just the low clouds and potential for lower visibility as that stratus settles in the overnight hours. So here it comes into tonight. We see our low pressure moving towards southeast Alaska, now up to 1,002 millibars, weakening ever so slightly, and just continuing to keep light rain throughout southeast Alaska. Don't expect a lot of winds with this system either. As you can see, the spread there in our lines, our isobars, are fairly wide, and that keeps our gradient much looser, so don't expect any gusty, massively gusty winds throughout that area. As we get up towards south central, again, we're still seeing kind of a squeeze between this low and this low, a little bit of a squeeze there, and with that we have that precipitation continuing right along the spine of the Alaska Range, stretching out over the Alaska Range and into portions of the northeast Copper River Basin. Then our area of low pressure continues to drop down. This is more of an upper level feature, so as it drops down, not going to see a lot of strong reflection at the surface. 1,007 millibars is not really anything to write home about, but at the upper levels it is really helping to shape our pattern as it dives down to the southwest. We'll talk more about that here as we look at the jet stream. Up towards the Alaska Range and farther towards the interior, we could see some of that rain, or the rain showers mixed with some snow. We have seen that up towards Denali National Park today, some snow showers reported up there. And then again, our fog and stratus with some light snow reported along the Arctic coast. So on into Wednesday now. Here we can see our area of low pressure is continuing to push off towards southeast Alaska and weaken quite rapidly now at 1,013 millibars, just some light rain. But as this pulls away, we should start to see the rain dissipate and maybe even a few breaks in the clouds. Our thermal trough that we talked about is not quite as intact on Wednesday as it is today even, or especially over the weekend. So just some showers, the possibility of isolated thunderstorms still in there for southwest Alaska, but our area of low pressure that we saw over the state is starting to pull off into the eastern portions of the Bering. We should see that fog lift off the Arctic coast there, and those showers come to an end as this area of high pressure, strong high, drops in and brings some gusty easterly winds to help things to dissipate out up there. And then just some rain, snow showers for higher elevations of the interior on Wednesday. On into Thursday now. Here's our real weather maker that's going to be kind of dictating what happens towards the end of the week. And we've been watching this for several days now. Expect fairly widespread and somewhat heavy. We do have some moderate rain mentioned with this coming up from the North Pacific. A good amount of moisture associated with this. Now the question is how much of this moisture makes it inland and how fast. Right now for Thursday, we're thinking most of it will stay just along the Alaska Peninsula and down over the eastern Aleutians, but the timing with this is a little bit in question as the models have been struggling to handle exactly how fast it comes in. And then over southeast Alaska, high pressure is going to build in behind that low, so we should have a clearing day for you all on Thursday. And then our area of lower pressure, or our thermal trough, will once again be right along the spine of the Alaska Range, not real active because lots of cloud cover, and our cool, cloudy onshore flow from the North Pacific will be in place. Up towards the up towards the Arctic coast, not a whole lot of weather going on up there. Should be a fairly nice day on Thursday. And towards the west coast, just a few isolated rain and snow showers. Let's take a look at our temperatures now. Over southeast Alaska this afternoon, we saw 50 degrees at Juneau at 4 o'clock. Klawock got up to 53 degrees, and it was 52 at Skagway. 51 there at Cordova, and 57 was a fairly warm spot at Valdez. And then as we got towards south central, 56 degrees in the Copper River Basin, 52 up in the Susitna Valley with a little bit of light rain. Towards the interior now, conditions a little bit cooler there, but still fairly mild in the upper 30s to low 40s. Fairbanks came in the mid 30s there with some light rain at the time. And then along the Arctic coast, we had temperatures anywhere in the upper 20s to low 30s. Out over the Seward Peninsula, Nome came in at 49 degrees with some mid 30s and upper 20s on the northern side. Out over the peninsula now, we see mainly mid 50s and some low 40s as we got out over the Alaska Peninsula and into Cold Bay region. Cold Bay came in at 46 where they had some low stratus. On the other side, there was False Pass, King Cove at 51 degrees, and that's just the difference between the stratus and the sunshine. For tonight's low temperatures, not a whole lot of change expected from last night with the cloud cover remaining much the same. We'll see temperatures in the mid 40s for much of southeast Alaska. Similar story for south central. As we look towards the interior, we'll start to creep into the upper 30s, and then north of the Brooks Range, we'll see 20s to low to mid 20s. Southwest Alaska will see fairly warm conditions overnight in the mid 40s, and out over the chain, mainly low to mid 40s. And for tomorrow's high temperatures, again, fairly similar to today. We'll see temperatures mainly in the low 60s for south central, mid to upper 50s for southeast Alaska with continued cloudy and rainy conditions. And then we'll see in the mid to low 30s for northern portions of the state, with the southwest portions being in the mid to low 50s. And over the Alaska Peninsula, we'll see temperatures down into the upper 40s. So taking a look at our flying weather now, not a whole lot to speak of, just some of those higher elevations are going to have some IFR conditions impacting the passes throughout southeast Alaska and into the Copper River Basin there. And then our fairly wide area of IFR associated with that marine stratus layer. And again, that same low stratus along the Arctic coast making for IFR conditions up there. Then on into Wednesday, we see our afternoon conditions. We'll have IFR fairly widespread with the marine stratus. We do want to mention our thunderstorm possibility still for southwest Alaska. And then some IFR conditions associated with that area of low pressure starting to pull away off into the Gulf, so those will just barely be clipping the landmass there unless you're flying out over the Gulf of Alaska. So our passes now in Atuvik will be VFR, again VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill should improve from IFR to MVFR with some isolated thunderstorms on the west entrance. Rainy MVFR becoming visual flight rules. Windy will be MVFR becoming visual. Isabel will be MVFR becoming VFR. And Mentasta will be MVFR becoming VFR. Tenita, MVFR becoming VFR. And Portage, same story. Chilkoot and White will be instrument flight rules becoming visual flight rules as that low pulls away. Freezing levels still remain quite high, up to 6,000 feet over southeast Alaska. We do have a smaller band here of slightly cooler temperature, warmer temperatures climbing up to about 4,000 feet, stretching in here out over the southwestern portion of the state. But then cooler air has settled in over the Bering down to 2,000 feet. And looking at our icing, we see above 8,000 feet over southeast Alaska with that low pressure, above 6,000 right on the Alcan border, and above 10,000 over southwest Alaska. Taking a look at our jet stream now, we're going to move it in from the northwest relatively fast at 105, dive down in support of this low at about 110, and then back up at 130. And this is really where our weather is going to come from as we move through the week. And then a fairly weak finger moving across underneath this area of high pressure at 70 knots. As we look at our 9,000 foot winds, fairly similar story there. I'll draw your attention to the most concerning areas of 35 knots from the west, south of this area of low pressure. Fairly light over much of the southern half of the state, and it's not until you get to the northern half that we see gusty easterly winds up to about 30 knots at 9,000 feet. And then on to 3,000 feet, similar story, about 35 knots here where the tightest gradient is just south of this low. Easterly winds at about 35 knots as well for the northeastern portion of the state, and then counterclockwise flow around this area of low pressure, about 20 knots moving into southwest Alaska there tomorrow afternoon. For turbulence, we expect below 6,000 feet, just some light to isolated moderate, and below 4,000 feet as you get towards the Brooks Range, below 4,000 feet with those easterly winds coming through channeled terrain there on the Arctic coast, and that'll be light to isolated moderate as well, and our area of thunderstorm possibility for tomorrow. Stay tuned, we'll be right back with your marine forecast.
Coming up on Destination Tomorrow, we take a look at NASA's Aviation Safety Program. We'll look back at some highlights of the program and find out what the future holds for aviation. All this and more next on Destination Tomorrow.
Judy, tell me a little bit more about the icing protection system. Do all planes have it?
There's what we call an anti-ice system where you don't allow the ice to grow at all. That's if you got a very hot leading edge. You see that in jets. Then there's a de-icing system which has pneumatic boots, that the boots will wrap around that leading edge, they'll inflate and pop the ice off. So you let the ice grow and then you got to get it off. The pneumatic boots are typically what you see with turboprop aircraft.
Does icing affect planes in, say, a warm climate?
Icing occurs everywhere. You've got to be aware of it. I've got a pilot friend who told me the worst icing he encountered was flying from Florida to the Caribbean in July at 16,000 feet. The worst icing he ever saw. But icing really can occur anywhere and any time. One of the things we do here at NASA is to have better designs. So maybe a system that would automatically turn on the ice protection system if a sensor goes up. The short-term solution is to train the pilots and educate them about how to detect icing, how to be aware of it, train them how to get out of the icing environment if and when they need to. Ideally, icing is a non-issue in the future. We're working to get there.
For many of us, fear is the biggest problem when it comes to flying. We thought it may be helpful to present you with some statistics that may or may not be helpful to those of you who are fearful flyers.
First, your chances of being involved in an aircraft accident are approximately 1 in 11 million, while your chances of being killed in an automobile accident are about 1 in 5,000, proving that the most dangerous part of your flight is the drive to the airport.
One last fact. Statistically, you have more of a chance of dying from the food served on board the flight than being involved in an aircraft accident.
Most people who have flown in an airplane have experienced turbulence. NASA is working on new warning systems to help pilots avoid dangerous turbulence. Paula Vaden has more.
If you've ever flown in an airplane, you are probably familiar with turbulence. Even for the most experienced flyers, the sudden, sometimes violent, irregular air motion can be an unsettling experience. In most cases, turbulence is merely an inconvenience that passengers and flight crews must endure. But in cases of severe turbulence, the violent shaking can not only cause serious injury to passengers and crew, it can also be fatal. In an effort to help aircraft avoid turbulence, researchers at NASA are testing new onboard aircraft systems. The Airborne Research Integrated Experiment System, or ARES, uses experimental systems that detect turbulence minutes before an aircraft encounters it. This new system may allow pilots to avoid severe turbulence, making flying safer. I spoke with Neil O'Connor in the Crew Systems branch at NASA Langley Research Center to find out more.
You can think of turbulence as any phenomenon in the atmosphere that's going to upset the airplane. Changes in wind that can cause the airplane to be disrupted from its normal flight. You can also get turbulence whenever you have wind rushing over the top of a mountain. The leeward side of a mountain can be very turbulent. You can also get turbulence wherever the jet stream is active. There's a high wind speed in the region of the jet stream, but slower right nearby. Thunderstorms can cause turbulence. Everyone knows right nearby the storm, but sometimes even 50 or 100 miles away in the clear air, you can get turbulence from a thunderstorm.
So Neil, how are pilots avoiding severe turbulence now?
For the most part, pilots have several simple options. They listen to the radio to hear if other pilots have already encountered turbulence in that area. So that means somebody's already been hit. They can also look at their onboard radar and try to, based on their experience, can extrapolate what they think might be, but it's not really foolproof. And they can also get a general forecast from the government sources or from their own airline.
There we got some turbulence now. We're about 3 miles short.
Though seldom damaging to modern aircraft, turbulence is the leading cause of in-flight injuries among passengers and flight crews. On average, 58 injuries aboard aircraft are reported each year. 98% of these injuries occur when unsuspecting passengers or crew are unbuckled or out of their seats when an aircraft encounters turbulence. Currently, there are no instruments on board aircraft to detect turbulence before a plane encounters it. NASA researchers hope to change this by incorporating new turbulence radar systems within existing onboard weather radars. With this new radar system in place, researchers hope to provide pilots with enough warning to either avoid the turbulent area or at least give passengers and flight attendants enough time to return to their seats and buckle up.
The radar system itself will just be a software upgrade to the existing wind shear radar that's already on board the airplanes. The beauty of that, of course, is that since it's just an upgrade to an already certified piece of hardware, it should be relatively inexpensive because you're just incrementally changing what's out there already.
So Neil, tell me how exactly this new system's going to work.
The way it'll work for the pilot is that he'll flip a switch that's labeled Turbulence, and then he'll have the new software running. It'll be running mostly at cruise altitudes where the pilots typically allow people to move around the cabin. It's not a problem when you're climbing or descending because everyone's already strapped in. So if you have a turbulence encounter there, it's not a big issue because everyone's already buckled in. But we want to help make a difference at altitude when you don't always know there's going to be turbulence out there. And this new product will be able to increase the capability of the system and increase the pilot's confidence in the accuracy of the system, leading to a better, safer environment.
Besides radar, is there any other kind of research with turbulence?
Doing other research, both onboard and otherwise. The onboard system is called the In Situ Turbulence Warning System, and that's a system that uses accelerometers on the airplane to measure what the airplane feels at a given moment. That'll be transmitted automatically to all other airplanes in the general area, along with the location. And a receiving airplane will take that data and adapt it to its own size and class of airplane, and then assess whether or not it's a threat to that airplane. And if it's a threat, then it'll tell the pilot. Another way of enhancing what we have now is improving our forecast capability. And that gets into modeling of the weather and other phenomena of the atmosphere, to better understand what the potential is for turbulence.
So Neil, what are your hopes for this project?
Well, the ultimate goal, of course, is to increase the safety and reduce injuries caused by turbulence on the airplane. Right now, it's very easy to prevent injuries when you know you're going to have turbulence. The pilot says, hey, we got to buckle up for a few minutes. Everyone does it, no one gets hurt. But you don't always know the turbulence is coming. So sometimes if you don't know, people are walking around and the plane gets a lurch, someone's going to get hurt. And that happens now. So we know we can make a difference by improving the product.
That's it for this edition of NASA's Destination Tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steele McGonigal.
And I'm Kara O'Brien. For all of us at NASA, we'll see you next time.
Let's take a look at our sea surface temperatures now. Again, mainly warm conditions right along the Gulf Coast here in the 50s, mid-50s even, for some places right up against the coastline. And some of that warmer water is starting to spread up towards the Bristol Bay and even up towards the Bethel area there. So Kuskokwim Delta area is also seeing those temperatures in the low 50s for the sea states. As we look at our sea ice here, we do have mainly similar conditions there. We have melting and rotting ice conditions according to our sea ice analysis this afternoon, and it's mainly starting to move around a little bit as it starts to open up a little bit more, so not really holding in place, but starting to open up throughout much of the western portions of the Bering and towards the Bering Strait. On into our marine forecast now. Southeast winds throughout southeastern Alaska on the inner passageways at about 25 knots for Wednesday, becoming 10 knots up towards Lynn Canal, and seas generally between 2 and 6 feet. Out over the open waters, we see southeast easterly winds 20 to 25 knots and 13 to 16 foot seas. On Thursday, we expect winds to shift around to the north for Lynn Canal and down towards Petersburg at about 10 to 15 knots, becoming northwest 20 knots for the Dixon Entrance region, and seas about 4 feet down to 2 feet near Lynn Canal. Out over the open waters, northwest and north winds 15 to 25 knots, seas between 6 and 8 feet. Then on for Wednesday for South Central, we can see fairly light conditions mainly out of the southwest and west, 10 to anywhere 25 knots, small craft conditions there just east of Kodiak Island, and seas generally between 7 and 10 feet out over the open waters and about 2 to 7 feet for the protected waters. On into Thursday now, we'll start to see a little bit more southerly to southeasterly winds throughout much of the region, 10 to 25 knots predominantly, with seas just a little bit lighter on Thursday, 6 to 8 feet for the open waters and about 2 to 6 feet for the protected areas. For the Alaska Peninsula, westerly flow at about 20 knots and seas generally between 5 and 7 feet. And then we'll see southeast and east flow on Thursday, 20 to 25 knots, seas generally between 5 and 7 feet south of the chain and 3 to 4 feet on the north side. For the Aleutians, we'll expect west to southwest winds across the chain, and again, generally between 15 and 20 knots, seas on the order of 4 to 6 feet. And then on into Thursday, more variable conditions and fairly light winds, 10 to 15 knots is all, and seas only getting up to 7 feet all over the western Aleutians there. Fairly good day for mariners out there. For the west coast on Wednesday, we expect a little bit more confused winds, northeast becoming northwest and then westerly towards the land mass there with that area of low pressure dropping in. Seas generally between 3 and 5 feet. And for Thursday, southeast winds along the coastline becoming northeast out over the Pribilofs there, out over the western Bering, and then southwest near the Pribilofs, 15 to 25 knots and seas generally between 4 and 6 feet. Easterly flow will dominate along the Arctic coast, 20 to 25 knots and freezing spray up near Kaktovik. And where the winds are, where the sea is open, 5-foot seas there and southeast winds near Kaktovik becoming mainly easterly 15 to 20 knots on Thursday. So let's recap tonight's forecast. Just see this area of low pressure moving away from the state, and we'll see this area of light showers and light rain continue for the Susitna Valley up towards the central portion of the state. And then on into Wednesday, a fairly quiet day across south central with just some possibility of isolated thunderstorms for southwest Alaska. Southeast should start to see improving conditions as we go through the day. Thursday should be quite a nice day for southeast with offshore flow and ridging building in. And then we'll shift our eyes to this area of low pressure as it brings rain up into the Alaska Peninsula. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.